Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send show. This is Francois, your host, and I'm here with Roel this morning. Hi Roel.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. It's early. Took me a lot longer to get up this morning to record.
Yeah, that's okay. But you're always here, right?
Yep, and I'm loaded on coffee, so I'm ready to go and excited to talk about 11AX.
Yeah, so today we'll deep dive into BSS Coloring. I tried to explain a little bit why it's defined and how it's defined in the draft. Right before we get into the subject, we wanted to mention a couple of news this morning. The first one is Migrate will be coming out with AX APs pretty soon. Mm-hmm. Have they announced it already, Roel?
No, they haven't. And the reason why I added this one in is because I was updating the notes from our previous episode. And I was going to add the Cisco. I was adding a link to the Cisco APs that are in the FCC website. And then I came across Meraki's FCC application, and it mentioned MR55 and the MR45. So the MR55 is an 8x8, and the MR45 is a 4x4, both 11AX APs. So, I mean, those should be coming out pretty soon, I think. So this year will be the announcement of 11AX APs, I think, for everyone.
Even 11AX clients, I think it's going to be the year of AX.
The year of AX, yeah. And what's interesting is it was kind of hard to tell whether or not Cisco, like where Cisco's going to go with 11AX APs, right? I assumed there was going to be a Cisco version and then also a Meraki version, or are they going to stick with Migrate being their flagship for AX APs? Who knows?
I guess we'll see. Or maybe they have, the new controllers. Will they announce new, AP, new features for the old eras? I guess the new Catalyst line.
Yeah. So I linked out to those in the show notes for episode 160. So if you go to cleartosend.net/160 at the bottom, you'll see those links out to both Cisco and Meraki APs.
All right. Another big news for the week. You bought an Apple Watch.
I did. Yeah, I splurged, right? And I was curious, what this thing is capable of doing on wireless. But I'm still getting used to it. I haven't really found out all the great features of the watch yet, but this is probably my favorite feature for the kids.
It's 5:31.
That's how early it is right now, 5:31 a.m.
Does your wife has an Apple Watch?
She does. So she was the first one to have it. So I let her try it out, and she said it was pretty good. So I got it for myself, and I primarily got it as a replacement for my the Fitbit. And my Fitbit just completely died. So now I'm just using the Apple Watch, and I just don't really wear a watch often. So now I have one.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing at home. My wife, I used to have a Fitbit, and then she replaced it with an Apple Watch. She likes it. I don't have one. I have a Garmin that I use.
Oh, you got the more advanced version.
Yeah. But I know that if you have an Apple Watch and your wife has an Apple Watch, you can do the walkie-talkie.
Yeah, I was playing with that last night, and I'm curious how that works. Maybe I'll do some captures to see. Does that come over as tagged as voice? I don't know.
Well, I guess you have your homework for the week.
The walkie-talkie feature is kind of scary because once you do it, it's like a walkie-talkie. It just starts playing on your watch, so there's no stopping it. You would actually have to disable your walkie-talkie feature just so people can't just start talking to you. Because imagine
you're doing a big presentation.
Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden your voice just pops up.
All right. Okay. Another big news for this week is so the videos for WLPC 2019 that was held in Phoenix a couple of weeks back are now available on YouTube.
Yeah.
So you can go to the WLAN Pros YouTube channel and watch all of them.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to watch some of these videos. There's a lot of great topics. So looking forward to spending my, I guess, the next week doing nothing but watching videos.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I started to watch a couple of them, and I'll continue to watch some of them. I'm traveling this week a little bit, so I'll have time to catch back on those videos. They actually have a couple of them on AX. They have one on 6 gig. And so yeah, looking forward to catch back on those videos.
And we'll link out in the show notes where you can find those. It's on YouTube. And I believe Keith is going to be adding the presentations pretty soon if he hasn't done so already. I remember he mentioned that on Twitter.
Yes, on his website, he will link the slides.
Yep. And then one thing that we will be testing out pretty soon is I have an Exceltex battery. Something that you could use for doing your surveys or AP on a stick. So I will be testing that out, and we'll talk about this in a future episode. It comes in a nice case and it's packaged very nicely, and looking forward to trying that. You can hear me opening it up because
that's nice. I would be interested to compare it to the other one that's on the market, the Venvolt.
The Venvolt, yeah.
I know it's small in size.
It's much smaller compared to the Venvolt, but we'll see how the capacity is and how easy it is to lug around with the rest of your equipment, and we'll have a comparison pretty soon. But we will talk about it by itself in a future episode.
All right. And then this week we came across something a little different. We came across a 60 gig wireless adapter. So that's a Y gig, right? 802.11ad. And it's used by a VR to connect a VR headset back to the base station.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a good use case for it.
Yeah, it's a very good use case for, the short range type of high bandwidth applications. So instead of having like HDMI cable connected back behind the headset and following you while you play around, you can have this little antenna connected to the headset, and it's used by HTC for the HTC Vive product line, and then it connects you back to the base station and the controller, I guess, and the TV. So we just came across that this week and thought it would be nice to mention it, that 80 is being used for some specific applications. I would love to see it more like, at home, maybe to replace HDMI connections between, your gaming console and TV or anything like that. It would be nice if you can just have the TV one day on the wall and no cables.
No cables, yeah. And I think this is probably like the first use case I've seen where they use 60 gigahertz. And I know the Microsoft Store often has a VR unit. I believe they also use the HTC headset. So maybe I'll take a visit that store and see if they're using the wireless adapter, and maybe they can show some statistics of how much of bandwidth is going through on that link and transferring those VR videos.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I think 60 gig is also used for point-to-point connections, or point-to-multipoints.
Yeah, I've used it with point-to-points, and you definitely can utilize those speeds. It's having a full duplex link, and as someone who's come from the enterprise wireless, you're not used to seeing full duplex wireless. So yeah, it's pretty amazing that you can get over gigabit speeds on those.
Was it using 802.11ad or just like a own protocol?
Yeah, it was a couple years ago. I can't even remember. I'd have to look it up. I think it was AD, but yeah, I could be wrong. That was more of my earlier wireless days.
That's cool. So so an application of 60 gig, that's pretty nice. And just to let you know that specific VR wireless adapter was using a Intel chipset. We'll link the the description, or the technical specifications about this chipset in the description.
Yeah, if you want to take a look.
Interested.
And looking back at that point to point, it was 11AD. The vendor, excuse me, the vendor was called Siklu, SIKLU, and it's millimeter wave is what the point to point guys call it, but it is 60 gigahertz, and yeah, point to point links. You can't really go that far with it with 60 gigahertz, but it does work.
All right, so let's talk about BSS coloring.
Yeah, and we're not talking about taking out a coloring book and coloring in BSS. So, here's my BSS. I'll color that in. Here's another BSS. I'll color that in.
Yeah, actually, that would be interesting to know why they named it BSS Coloring, right? Maybe they were trying to spice it up a little bit.
Yeah, why color? Because technically, there are no colors when you talk about BSS Coloring.
Technically, just zeros and ones.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the bit that you're adding in there. It's a value. It's a number. So there really is no color. Although we can put a color to it, right? If we wanted to.
Yeah, maybe someone will do that. 63 colors.
Yeah. Well, that's the first thing. There's 63 colors that you could use or numbers, but maybe because the standard the draft does not talk about how a vendor does BSS coloring, like how they should actually implement it. Maybe if there's a static option, right? Like let's say you want to make a certain channel a specific color, maybe in the GUI there'll be a color drop down. I don't know.
That's a good idea. I mean, it would make sense now. The name would make sense.
Yeah, and then you could pick your favorite color. Maybe you could have a custom color. I don't know.
That would be cool. And you can have a clear to send color.
Oh, we'll have to rename the podcast.
All right. So, what is BSS coloring, and why do we need it in? Or why did they introduce it in 802.11ax?
Yeah, because that was my first question. Looking into this, looking at the 802.11ax draft, you see BSS color in there, but I was reading it going, why do we even need BSS coloring? Like, what's the purpose of this?
Well, I think going back to the overall goal of AX is to make everything more efficient. The use of the airtime more efficient. And one of the biggest problem we have in our networks right now is when we have a lot of APs, we have to start reusing channels. And when you start reusing channels, you can introduce co-channel interference. And this is not
Medium
very efficient
contention
for the use of the airtime. Right, everyone is contending for the same channel, even though they're using different APs, and then you can be competing with, you could have multiple APs inside your environment competing for the same airtime, or you could even have your APs competing with your neighbor's APs to access specific channels, right?
Yeah, and I also see this, like as you said, with your neighbor's APs. This happens a lot in your highly dense environments. So places like dorms or apartment complexes where it's very tight, right? There's a lot of APs in a given area. A lot of people still using 2.4, so you only have 3 non-overlapping channels. The BSS coloring is where it comes in and it's supposed to help with the frequency reuse here. And then there's another topic we'll talk about later in the end that we think we'll dedicate a specific episode to called spatial reuse. But go ahead, Francois.
No, that's really good. And what I was going to add is, so BSS coloring is that new feature that introduced with AX. Actually, it's not. It wasn't introduced by 11ax. It was actually first defined in the 802.11ah amendment.
Yep, it's already in the standard.
Yeah, exactly. So that it's nice to see how the IEEE, the different groups, they start reusing different techniques from different amendments. So the BSS coloring is coming from the AH amendment, and basically what the BSS coloring is allowing us to do is to how can I say that? So it allows you to pretty much
reuse the same frequency. So you have an overlapping. I guess the best way to put it is if you just take a look at one channel and two APs, right? Let's say they're on the same channel, channel 36. And so with BSS coloring, you could have the one BSS be a color of blue, for example. We'll actually use colors. And then your other BSS can be yellow, and both on channel 36. Now, traditionally, if a device was transmitting on channel 36, there's going to be a back off, right? Or you have to wait for that transmission to complete, and there's a nav and all that. There's also the physical detection, the carrier sense, and with BSS coloring, if the device receiving transmission, for example, sees that, let's say its BSS color is blue, but it receives a frame that has a BSS color of yellow, it's gonna see that frame, because we'll talk about the preamble, but it'll see the frame, it'll see that it's a different BSS color, and it'll just ignore that frame and still allow its communications on channel 36 for its own BSS color. And so this is where it allows you to have this overlapping BSS and still improve the efficiency of wireless by allowing these communications, these transmissions, to still be used, because BSS coloring tackles the issue of frequency reuse.
Yeah, exactly. So BSS coloring will allow us to allow the AP to adjust the CCS threshold to the clear channel assessment threshold. So like Roel said, you can pretty much talk on top of another AP if they're not the same color. And so what's important here to understand is that both clients or both stations will be using the same channels, right? But they might be far enough to not interfere with each other or have a good enough SNR to be able to still decode the information they're sending, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
It's really a reducing a BSS collision. What we think of in the traditional, when we talk about contention, and how if two devices are speaking at the same time, you're overlapping channels, then one of them has to back off. But in this case, it's because of these thresholds and the BSS coloring, it's still going to allow that, as long as the client sees that as a different color.
Yeah, and if you read the draft, they talk a lot about OBSS, overlapping BSS. So that's pretty much what they're talking about here, overlapping BSS. So multiple BSS on the same channel that are overlapping. Mm-hmm. And then they define different mechanisms to measure how much overlap there is, and if they need to adjust the colors.
Yeah, and this is where the complexity comes in, because these colors can change. The draft specifies that the AP can decide if it wants to change colors, and then there's even a color change announcement, which we'll get further down in this discussion. But maybe we should talk about a little bit more in detail of how this BSS color is communicated to other wireless devices, right? Because how do you know what BSS color you're going to be part of?
Exactly. So the BSS color, like we said earlier, is not actually a color; it's just a field. It's a 6-bit field. So the values of the BSS color can range from 1 to 63.
Yep. So you essentially have 63 different colors you could work with with a BSS. And you and I were talking about this because one thing that I forgot was it's for the channel, right? So if you talk about a very dense environment and you have 63 different available colors to use, that's a lot of colors on a same channel if everyone started off on channel 36, for example, right?
Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever get to use all the colors at the same time, even in very dense environment. I don't think we will. One thing that just came to mind is how is that going to impact the way we design Wi-Fi networks? Because right now we take, we're very careful about assigning channels, channel overlap.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using Ekahau and you have that visualization of co-channel, and usually you have that set to a specific parameter. Let's say you only allow up to about 2 APs on the same channel. Now this is a little bit different because we are going to allow channel overlap, but now we need to take into consideration 63 different colors. So yeah, how do you design for that and ensure that, okay, I'm not reusing colors now, like you're not exceeding the number of colors. But I don't know, yeah, like you said, we're probably not going to get to that point because we have designed buildings where you don't. I guess that's where the difference is. Someone who designs for wireless is not going to purposely go, let me put all these on channel 36 and run with it with the BSS color. They'll probably most likely, at least try to mitigate the initial channel overlap. But maybe in scenarios where it isn't designed, the BSS color comes in and still helps create some efficiency around where there's no design.
Yeah. I think, and then we'll have to see how the vendors implement it. So when you read the draft, you see a lot of out of scope. So that means the vendor is pretty much free to implement it however they want and using the algorithm they want. So.
I remember seeing that line in the draft. It said something. It essentially said it that way, which was that it's up to the vendor to implement the BSS coloring and how they're going to, how do you coordinate that with your own APs? So we could see a method in which a vendor allows you to maybe set how many colors you want to use, right? Out of the 63, how many max colors do you want to have available to use? Or maybe you could statically assign a color to an AP. I don't know.
Or maybe they can dynamically start introducing BSS colors if they see a lot of interference.
Yeah, that could be another way. If there's a specific threshold met, percentage of channel overlap, start implementing BSS color. I don't know. I guess you can.
Let's go back to the BSS color field.
All right, so the BSS color field, right? One of my other questions that I had was, where do you see BSS color? Like, which frames is this in, and where inside the frame is it located?
So that's a good question. That's always the question we're asking ourselves when we read the draft. So it's going to be included at the file layer. So in the preamble. There's a subfield, I guess. That's called the HE SIG A field, and in this field you can have a subfield called BSS color, and it's 6 bits, right? So it's just going to be the color itself. So that's going to be in the preamble of the PPDU, right? And then so that's at the file layer, and then at the MAC layer. You're gonna find the BSS color information in a information field that's called BSS color information field, and this information field is part of the HE operation element.
Yep, and this can be found in your beacon frames, your association and reassociation frames, probe response frames. And so when you're doing a capture, you should be able to see this HE operation element, and then you expand that and you'll see the BSS color information field. It's going to be 6 bits with that, again, the value range between 1 and 63.
Exactly. And so that's in management frames, like you said, beacons, probe responses, association and reassociation responses. And it's optional, though. In the standard, they say it doesn't have to be there. But I guess we'll see If it's used, we should be able to see it in beacons.
Yeah, and
Right.
if it isn't used, there's actually a BSS Color disabled field where an AP just won't use it. Just going to be disabled.
So that's where you'll be able to find the information.
Yeah, and this information is going to help those devices receiving a signal to identify which BSS it's part of. Just like as we talked about in the previous discussions we just had. And it's going to primarily be, in my opinion, for channel access, but it's also used for reducing power consumption, which I believe we'll talk about this in a future episode when we talk about target wake time. And then also to update the nav.
And since it's present in the beacon, I'm guessing that's information we'll be able to get from Wi-Fi scanner tools like Wi-Fi Explorer or Insider from Metageek.
Yeah, and I guess if we look at Adrian's tool, the Wi-Fi Explorer, because it does support 802.11ax. I wonder if he's also, with that support, means you can see the BSS color. I think that's something we should look into and see whether or not that's supported.
Yeah. All right, we'll see. I have an AX API at home, but I haven't had time to configure it. So I'll try that and try to see the beacon.
Yeah, that would be pretty
I'm
neat.
not even sure if the BSS color is implemented.
Yeah, I guess it depends. Yeah, maybe that. Are you able to share which vendor you have?
Yeah, it's an Era Hive AP.
I believe they have that implemented, the BSS color field. So yeah, maybe if Adrian's tool has, well, I guess if you have the AP, you probably can manage it. I wonder if they have an option to configure it. But I guess if we go back to we keep going off topic. But if we look at the BSS color field, and I had talked about earlier that the AP can change its color, right? And it's interesting when I was reading this about changing color, because let's say there's another AP on the same channel using the same color. That's, I guess, that's effectively a full channel overlap, right? Same channel, same color. Now that if the AP detects that, it could actually change its color and go, all right, someone else is using the same channel and color as me. I need to tell all my other devices associated that I'm going to change colors. And so there is a change color element that it tells all the clients, and it gives a time of when it's going to change the color. So I think that's also a really neat feature in trying to maintain the efficiency, and with the 63 different available colors to use, still avoid that channel overlap. And it reminds me of those the algorithms, right? Like if you talk about Cisco, the RRM algorithm. My question is with your Cisco AeroNet, that algorithm is not gonna. I don't know. Will that be updated for BSS coloring?
Yeah, I think they'll have to. It's going to be part of the algorithm update or the implementation of BSS color. It's going to be a big change for how Wi-Fi works if it's implemented, and how we design for Wi-Fi, I think. And the BSS change feature, I think it's going to be useful if you have neighboring APs, especially like consumer APs, probably gonna have a default BSS color, maybe of 1, and then if you have APs in your environment that also have the same color, maybe that's going to be useful to change the color and avoid being on the same color in the same BSS.
Yeah, because the rules still apply. You still have contention. Still got to get transmit opportunity. And when I talked about this colors being APs being on the same colors, it is a collision, because it does mention that in the draft. There is a color collision, and so it's going to be interesting how these APs interact, how they react to having a collision. And what I think is interesting is when there is a collision, or a collision that can be detected, the APs can trigger this. What do they call it? It's a beacon. I think it's like a beacon report where if the client supports it, it can tell the AP, hey, here are the other AP neighbors I can hear and what colors they're on. So I think that's really interesting. And making this even more efficient is by allowing the clients to report back on the colors that are in the area.
So they call it the autonomous BSS color collision reports. So like you said, the client can can by itself reports back to the AP and say, okay, here I'm getting some collisions on this color. I'm getting some OBSS. Would it be a good idea to change the color, right? And then the AP will decide, right? The AP will decide to change the BSS color used, right? And then to do that, it will just send the BSS color change announcement element. So that's part of a beacon. It can be part of a beacon frame, probe response, reassociation or association response. Or it can send a BSS color change announcement frame, right? Just to announce that, okay, guys, I'm going to change the color in that, in like at that specific time.
It'll have a countdown. That's an actual action frame. And it will contain in the frame what the new BSS color will be. And then it'll start the countdown so all the devices are in sync and know when to switch to the new color.
This process reminds me of the DFS when they do the channel change announcement. It's kind of like the same, right? The AP is telling all the associated clients, okay, I'm going to move channels. I'm going to go to that channel at that specific time. So it's kind of like the same idea here. And then the AP will make the decision based on the reports, right? Based on the color collision reports, right? So the clients will be sending their reports, and then the AP will make the decision to move to a specific colors. Because I believe you can, the clients, when they report the collisions, they can also report on, they can also see the other colors.
Yeah, they can. They definitely see the other color. Now, the only thing I don't remember reading the draft, if this is a mandatory option for clients to be able to report back. If it isn't, then that wouldn't be as efficient for the environment. I think they should, because it just contributes back to a better Wi-Fi, and having the clients and the APs communicate with each other, since you have both sides speaking, right? The clients can just hear so much more compared to where the AP's at. So if they can report back on multiple things, which they are defined there in the draft on how clients can interact better with an AP, this alone can at least coordinate a lot of this channel overlap and be able to tell APs, all right, I guess this is where the vendor implementation comes in, is what is that threshold where the AP should change to a different either color or channel?
Yeah, I agree with you, because usually when we deal with channel overlap right now, we only care about the AP, right? And the signal received by the AP, but we don't really care about the clients. The clients will have their own radiation area, I guess, right? And they will introduce their own interference. So if you can have the clients report back to the AP, so the AP has more information, at the end of the day, it's still the AP making the final decision, right? So it's pretty much giving the AP more meat to take the more optimized decision, right?
Right.
So I agree with you.
As it should be the AP to drive those decisions. I just think the draft and the standards specifically don't really create this this overall agreed upon standard across APs and clients. And I think that's where we're going to see most of the issues, is how this gets implemented in a device versus how it gets implemented in an AP, and which features are going to be implemented by those devices. So if they aren't going to be implementing most of the feature sets here of 11AX, then we're not going to see the full potential and capability of this draft in the upcoming years.
I guess we'll have to see what the Wi-Fi Alliance, define in their certification program for Wi-Fi 6.
Yeah, that's probably best to see. I guess we should look that up and share it in the links. I'll make a note of that.
All right, so we've talked about the BSS color fields and where we could find this information in the different frames. We talked about the fact that an AP can change the color it's been using for BSS. We talked about the fact that clients can report information about overlapping BSS.
You could still have a color collision, so a collision still can occur.
Yeah, collision can still occur, right, within your own colors.
We talked
about... And this will just as usual, if you have a collision, you'll have a retransmit.
And then it'll be interesting seeing in the future how we're going to plan for this, design for this, and also validate, right? So if you have co-channel, how's that going to look like if there's colors?
So what I think will happen is if you have multiple colors on the same channel, right? You could have multiple devices talking at the same time on the same channel. So this will pretty much reduce your SINR, your signal to noise and interference ratio, right? So if you reduce your SINR, you might potentially reduce the modulation, the MCS you can use, and this could also maybe increase the collisions. So it would be interesting to see, how efficient it is. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be efficient, way better than what we do today.
Mm-hmm. It definitely requires a lot more processing on the AP side and also probably on the client side. Not as much on the client side, but more so on the AP.
And the AX AP becomes like a computer. Like, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
You need whole new chips.
They have to be crazy powerful.
So what we're saying here is 802.11ax still going to require new hardware. Should you migrate your APs to 11ax APs now if you're in the middle of an upgrade cycle? I guess that's a good question, because if you need to get new APs, you need to get new APs. But there's only a few vendors that are actually selling AX draft versions of this. But I don't know how much is going to actually change between now and when they plan on making this ratified. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, that would be. And also, what's going to be very important is how the vendors will implement the drafts and which feature they will decide to implement. Are we going to have different waves, wave 1, wave 2, what's going to be in wave 1, what's going to be in wave 2, and all of that will pretty much influence if you want to migrate. I think the big one is OFDM-A. That's probably going to be wave 1.
Yeah, and at least you'll get the efficiencies there, assuming you've got your 11ax clients. But you'll get your OFDM-A, which is what we talked about in our previous episode 160, which is the multiple access on OFDM.
And that's already a big, change, right? So as you get more and more X clients, you'll see the benefit of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see now why some vendors are touting that you'll get better better speeds out of this, right? I can see where they're getting at. What I don't see is how they're able to come up with the numbers.
Yeah, you mean the
throughput numbers?
Speeds?
Yeah.
So how I see it is, so the goal of the IEEE was to make the protocol more efficient, right? That's why they call it HE, high efficiency. The way I see it is, if you make it more efficient, eventually you increase the speeds. Right.
But what does that speed look like?
It's I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, unless these guys have their own clients already and they're testing it. But I guess Samsung will see first. One of the first clients that I think will actually make mainstream is that mobile phone. So I was looking at the Wi-Fi Alliance as we were talking, and they don't have their certification up yet. I don't believe so.
No.
Yeah, it says coming in 2019. I think it might come near the end of 2019, maybe closer towards the ratification of 802.11ax. But once we see that, we can see what's going to be mandatory, right? And what's mandatory out of these out of the BSS coloring. I think we probably will see some stuff that's going to be optional, especially on the client support. My guess is client support is going to say optional for the reporting. Report? Yeah, the reporting back.
Wow, I guess we'll see. It would be interesting to know.
Yeah, well,
that's a cool thing about reading the draft, right? You learn more and more stuff, and you're just wondering how it's gonna play in the real world.
Yeah, and going through the draft itself is really interesting and really still up to you and how you interpret it, right? Because you and I will have discussions, and there's times where I interpret it differently.
And then maybe the vendors will interpret it differently.
There's just all this confusion how this is going to work. But yeah, there's just so much more we can talk about. And so I guess what we wanted to say here at the end is we're going to dedicate another episode towards something called spatial reuse operation. It's actually a lot to talk about. It's a decent section in the draft, and I think requires its own attention, because that part is also very interesting, which will tie into, I guess, BSS coloring.
Yes, exactly. It's related to BSS coloring, and it's allow the medium to be reused more often between overlapping BSS in a dense deployment scenario.
Yeah, so this episode will actually go into details of how that's going to work, right? Because
it's complex.
It's complex. You still have to avoid that collision somehow, right? And you have energy detected and all this other stuff to talk about that I think will start expanding more as we get into like these really small details that I don't really hear a lot of people talking about yet.
Yeah, exactly. And it's even reading through it, it's very hard to understand. They have different mode of operations that we can talk about. And pretty much the overview, the higher level overview, the AP will request the association clients to gather information about the neighborhood. And what they mean by neighborhood is just, I guess, the ARF environment on the specific channel.
Yeah.
And then it could be, for the AP could request that for a specific BSS ID or specific SSID or specific channel. And then it will be used by the AP to also determine which BSS color to use, right? And to determine how the BSS colors are used in the neighborhood, among the neighborhood, the neighboring APs. And then I think you mentioned that earlier, but the frames used would be the beacon request and the beacon report to exchange information about the neighborhood between the APs and the clients. And then you can hear my daughter calling me.
That's okay.
So I guess it's time.
That's a good way to end it. But yeah, look. Thanks for joining, Francois. And if you have to drop off, that's fine. I'll end the show.
It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, I'll attend to her right after this, and we'll have breakfast together.
All right. Well, if you guys have any questions or comments, head over to the show notes. You can go to cleartosend.net/161, where we'll have all this information and links to the resources we talked about. Hit us up on Twitter if you want to talk about this at Clear to Send. And we look forward to delivering the next part of our 802.11ax series, which we'll announce shortly, whether it'll be spatial reuse or something else, because there's still more to talk about. So that's all for our show. We hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please share it out with your friends and anyone else you think will find this useful. And hit us up with a review if you also think you enjoyed this episode very much. Go to cleartosend.net/iTunes. Let us know what you think, and let others know what they could be expecting from our show. That's pretty much it. I want to thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.